Hello, welcome to the Oral History of Criminology project. We are here today in National Harbor, Maryland, at the annual meeting of the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences in 2023. My name is Alida Merlo, and I am very pleased to interview Peter Benekos of Mercyhurst University about his life and distinguished career in criminology and criminal justice. Let me begin by giving a synopsis of Pete's academic career and his professional life. He received his baccalaureate degree from Clarion University of Pennsylvania in social sciences, his Master of Arts from the University of Cincinnati in sociology, and his PhD from the University of Akron in sociology with criminology as a substantive area. For 36 years, he was on the faculty at Mercyhurst University beginning in 1979. While on the faculty at Mercyhurst University, he served as chair of the department. He served as a graduate coordinator. He served as the dean of the School of Social Sciences there. He also served as the executive director of the Thomas Gamble Civic Institute and also the director of the Center for Justice Research and Policy. In fact, he was instrumental in starting those centers at Mercyhurst University. And he also served as a senior policy analyst for the Center for Child and Family Policy. Prior to his career in academia, he had experience in the field, working for the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, both in the institutional setting and in a community corrections environment as well. So he came to the university already with a pretty good understanding, I would say, of how the field of criminal justice actually is administered in our society. In addition to his various contributions to the university, he also has been very active in the community of Erie in many capacities, but two that I'd like to highlight. He's been involved with the Harbor Creek Youth Services program as a board member, beginning with that in 2005 and continuing still today, and been instrumental in their programs as well in developing. And he's also served as the advisory board member for the Department of Corrections and the Citizens Advisory Committee for a correctional institution, SCI Albion, in that area. Dr. Benekos has had a distinguished and extraordinary career, and I'd like to just briefly talk about a couple of the awards you've received as well. He has received the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences Founders Award. He has received the Academy's Outstanding Mentor Award. He has received the Academy's Donald A.J. McNamara Outstanding Publication Award. He also has received awards from the regional organization, the Northeastern region, and those awards include the Gerhard O.W. Mueller Innovator Award, and the Founders Award, and the Fellow Award. He also previously served as president of the Northeastern Association of Criminal Justice Sciences. When you look at the body of work that you've had in your career, it's extraordinary. Over 9 books that you've actually either edited or co-authored in the field, beginning in 1992. Over 50 publications, including journal articles and book chapters, newsletters, as well as many other technical reports that you've done for the Civic Institute or for the Center for Justice Research and Policy. Over 130 conference presentations in the course of your career, beginning right here at ACJS not so long ago in 1983 with the first one that you gave at an ACJS meeting. So fast forward to 2023, and I know you're on the program this week for another paper presentation. So it's a long and distinguished history with the Academy. There's been themes to your work when I'm looking at that work in a retrospective way, and I see the theme of policy, criminal justice policy, juvenile justice policy, corrections, community corrections, and there may be some more we're going to talk about it as we have our opportunity for this chat today. But you have certainly been engaged in a way where you not only do the research, but you work in the community to see that research put into action. So it's not just, here's an idea, I have this idea. It's an opportunity to see policy in action and do research on that as well, which is really fantastic. In terms of professional organizations, I mentioned the Northeastern Association of Criminal Justice Sciences, but you've also been you are a lifetime member of the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences and a member of the American Society of Criminology, the two major discipline organizations in our field. And you've also served as trustee on the executive board for the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences as for the Northeast region first, a 3-year term, and then subsequently as trustee at large for the whole United States for a 3-year term. And I looked up your service, Pete, to the Academy, and I'm happy to report you've served on 25 committees in the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences. So your service is truly extraordinary. And of course, I don't want to in any way say that you've given service to many organizations, but ACJS, I think, is where your heart has been in terms of involvement in professional organizations, and certainly the Northeast, when you served as president and continued to serve on committees and be involved in that as well. So I think I've given a brief summary. I couldn't go on, but I know there are other things to discuss today. So I'd like to ask you a question. That is to start off with, how did you come to study criminal justice?
Okay, first of all, that was a great introduction. Thank you for summarizing my whole life. But I appreciate that you pulled out some of those themes and that idea of connecting the classroom to the community, which I think is very important to me. But I didn't start out, I had no vision of criminal justice, being a professor or doing research. I graduated and got a job teaching psychology and sociology in a public high school, and I thought, this is my career. And then in 1971, there was a riot, an insurrection in Attica, and criminal justice was not in my awareness, so I didn't have any courses as an undergraduate. But that riot, that insurrection, and what was going on television really captured me. They, gave me, an inspiration that I thought I would want to go and work in a prison. My parents thought I was nuts. But I applied for a job teaching in the state prison system, and 7 months later, I got called for an interview, and I left the public education and went into the corrections education. And that really opened my eyes. I was there as a teacher teaching adult basic education and general education development. And as part of that, I was assigned to work in the Diagnostic and Classification Center. Each prison at that time had its own section of the new commitments, then would be evaluated in 30 to 60 days, and you'd interview them, write their reports, collect their information. So for a period of a couple of years, I saw a number of different clients coming into the institution. And their stories and the background, the police reports, it was just really quite an education. So that's how I came to criminal justice. I left Huntington and went to Cincinnati, got my master's degree, then went back to Huntington as a corrections counselor and worked there a couple of years. And then I transferred to the other end of the system, the pre-release center in Erie. And that really opened me to a larger aspect of criminal justice because I worked with the parole board, I worked with the courts, I worked with the sheriff's department. So I really got to see much more of the criminal justice system. And in the process, I was invited to do some adjunct teaching at Gannon University, at Mercyhurst University, and I loved teaching. It was great connecting what was going on in the institutions or in the pre-release center with the classroom, and I really enjoyed it. And a full-time position opened up at Mercyhurst, and then I understood that there was more to be an academic than just teaching. There's a whole other side to it. But so that's how I came to it. It was really kind of serendipity that happened. And I certainly did not plan to stay at Mercyhurst. And from there, I just enjoyed that. I adjusted fairly well. He decided it would keep me there, but I needed to go back and get my doctorate. So I commuted back and forth to Akron, did a residency, and the rest was learning more, doing research, and trying to make a difference. And I think in the sense of, you mentioned the Civic Institute, and you mentioned the community agencies that I worked with and tried to collaborate with them, those were really high points of working.
It really was a research and action kind of operation when you think about it.
Yeah.
It's really extraordinary that you were able to create those kinds of relationships with those agencies and organizations, have the vision to have the institute established, and then to just be a whole part of that. And with graduate school, the students being involved as well and doing the research, it was great.
Yeah. It really made a difference to think of myself at that time, and I didn't know it at the time I was doing it. It was kind of in hindsight that I realized that it was really a teacher-scholar model, where you're a scholar, you're doing research, you're getting involved, and then you're teaching what you're doing. And some students got that, and they understood that. I think, speaking of teaching and that community connection, it was also an opportunity to get students involved in the community too, not just through internships, but doing some volunteer work and guiding them into the different agencies that I was now aware of in the community. And some students really flowered and prospered from those experiences, and others, muddled through. But I really think that town gown, that distinction that is made, there's really a lot to be said for that understanding that there's more than just the university or college that you're working in.
And there certainly is, and I think you really captured it, beautifully in your career. What about when you were working in the institutional setting and in the community corrections? Were there certain sort of moments or experiences where you said, "This is something I've got to look into, or I've got to learn more about," or that was enough to make you think, "This is the field for me. I've identified it"?
Good question. I don't know if there was a moment. I think, working in the prison really opened my eyes. I was a young kid out of college. I think naive, honestly, and meeting people that were decent people that did something wrong, and meeting people that were vice presidents of banks to people who were long-term gang members for Philadelphia. I mean, there was just such a mix of people, and it was hard to stereotype or generalize. It was really, so I got the sense that there's more to this than this. And I think, I was reminded of Brian Stevenson's great comment that he keeps coming back to, is that each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. And I didn't know that then, but in hindsight, that's what I kind of realized. I came later to understanding the importance of some of those theories that I learned in sociology, but the master status, and just realized how prevalent that was, especially for the individuals coming out into the pre-release center, how that status was that was who they were. More contemporarily, I sit on the county's drug and alcohol advisory board, and we try to talk about people with addiction, not addicts. It's important to recognize there are people that have a problem, and we try to focus on the people part rather than the addiction as being what we can work with and try to improve their people side, their humanity, if you will. But I think it was just an exciting time back in the 70s and 80s to be in criminal justice. And there was, I remember there was talk about rehabilitation until somebody said nothing works. But there was this conversation about rehabilitation, and that's what pulled me into the prison. And went in there as, I was going to be Don Quixote. I was going to make a big difference. And I learned a lot about bureaucracy and hypocrisy, and a lot of lessons that came out of it, I think. Learning some of the bureaucracy was interesting. I remember that my office was at the back of one of the cell blocks, so I'd have to walk through all these gates, and of course I didn't have keys, only the corrections officers had keys. Walking through there, the rotunda, going back to the end of the cell block. So I was really back into the institution. And, learning the job, the phone rings, I pick it up, you say, hello. And I was told, your name and your department. Okay, I got it. It was the deputy superintendent that was calling. So, you learn those kinds of things when you're naive and you pick up on that. But, I think realizing that bureaucracies have a life of their own, and you can talk about reform, rehabilitation, whatever, but it just doesn't reach the point of critical mass in the bureaucracy. It's just very difficult. It was very frustrating working in the prison, trying to make a difference when there were so many other countervailing forces that were going on, there dynamics that were in the institution.
And it was a different era in the 70s as well, where rehabilitation was at least articulated as being one of the primary focuses that you're supposed to deal with.
Yeah, it was. And again, when I started with the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, there were 7 prisons and about 8,000 inmates. And now there are 23 prisons with about 38,000. That mass incarceration really changed a lot, and how things were being done. And I think, one of the things that what we talked about before is that the money for those prisons and staff came from someplace. And if you looked at the budget over time, the budget for public education in Pennsylvania was shrinking, and for the Department of Corrections, it was increasing. And that was just a it was a political decision how the money was going to be spent without raising taxes. And I think there are consequences for that, as you can see in the Pennsylvania higher education system.
Right. And other states, I think, had a similar situation. In California, they had a similar situation, which definitely the money had to come from somewhere. Mm-hmm. And education, for whatever reason, was chosen as the one that was going to be giving up.
And that was unfortunate. But, as you said, it wasn't just Pennsylvania. It was happening, and money had to come from somewhere. Right. But I think, mass incarceration is, we keep studying, really dramatically, I think, changed the whole focus of what was going on. It was just kind of the exacerbation of those philosophies of punishment and long-term sentencing and mandatory sentencing, and just really kind of wanting to exclude people from our society. And, the research showed that didn't work. And unfortunately, hearing the drumbeat of mass incarceration or lock them up again is kind of disconcerting. It's kind of like, what lessons did we as a society, as policymakers, learn?
Let's talk about that for just a couple of minutes. This kind of, there's a lot of talk about mass incarceration and how we obviously embarked on the wrong path. It did not work. And yet there's some indications, and some people would say clearer than others, that we are returning to that. There is a kind of drumbeat that's occurring right now about reverting to a kind of tough on crime stance. Would you like to help us on that in there too?
Well, again, I'm going to pick up with the cycle of juvenile justice, which is really a cycle of justice, really, where the pendulum does swing back and forth, where we have periods of time where there's kind of a progressiveness and optimism, rehabilitation, helping, and inclusion. And then that swings over to punishment, exclusion, lock them up, punishment, retribution. And I think, you see that going back and forth. It doesn't stop if we're on the rehabilitation side, it doesn't stop the punishment side. It just puts the light on that side. Now the light does seem to be going back when there is concern about how the media is portraying crime and violence. And that plays to the emotional part of the public's reaction, which plays into the politicians' response of the quick fix, which is to punish, to remove the people from society. And I've been around long enough to see that that's what happened before, and we seem to be on the precipice of seeing that happen again. And it's not encouraging to anticipate what would happen again with another wave of mass incarceration, where I think, I'm not to talk current events, but looking at the discussion about the sentencing reform in the District of Columbia, which was after a lot of study and rational decision-making and committees to shorten the sentences, to remove mandatory sentencing, to change the philosophy. And that didn't go through. That was a political decision, not a rational, academic, research, evidence-based decision. And that's always frustrating when you see the information, you know the lessons, but it doesn't cross over to the other side.
And it's easier, quicker, as you pointed out, to just take the approach or take the stance to get tough on crime.
Just a plug for, we wrote about that in the book Ideology, or What's Wrong with the Criminal Justice System, Ideology, Politics, and the Media. And I think that was one of the high points of our publication. I think that book really laid out an awful lot that I see so relevant now. I think that model of ideology, politics, and media, if you look at that, you can really kind of understand what's happening with all of this. And I think we wrote about, politicians' answer is, listen, I get elected in 2 years. I can't wait 10 years to see what happens if you try to rehabilitate somebody. I have to do something now so I can go back to my constituent. And if that's how that's how policies are made, we're kind of in the short end.
Exactly. And it kind of gives a short shrift to even delinquency prevention, because, again, the results aren't immediate. I want to know what's going to happen next week, not what's going to happen in 18 months, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it might be. So when I summarized what I thought were the themes of your work, or the areas that you expounded on, researched the most in your career, would you like to talk more about that, what those themes were, or to explain more about that? So when you look back, and you said one of the contributions you feel very fond of is the book we did together, What's Wrong with Criminal Justice, Politics, Ideology, and the Ideology, Media, and Politics. But would you like to talk about, well, what contributions do you feel when you think about your entire career?
Well, I'd like to ask some good questions. I think trying to present fair arguments for the importance of treatment, rehabilitation, and treating people humanely. And I know that seems very Pollyannish and naive, but I think really in teaching and in committees and in our writing, I think we try to present, here's what's happening, here's the evidence, here's the data, here are the data, and in that context, to try to present, that there is a possibility to do better. This doesn't have to be as it is, and I think we try to be fair, we try to be balanced. I think in our work we really underscore the importance of justice. I mean, however you define that, but just in the sense of trying to treat people fairly and equally, and give them opportunities, and recognizing again that there are many dynamics that are going on in people's lives, and people are kind of caught up in different traps or different tracks, if you will, and it's not easy to pull them out of that, and it requires kind of patience and looking, I guess, at a humanistic level, that given the opportunity, or given the lack of opportunity, my life could have gone a very different way.
Sure.
And I think I try to be sensitive to that. I'm not always able to keep focus on that, but I think that was important. I think that's just trying to treat people well and understand, that they have a lot to contribute. Try to overlook any weaknesses or faults that they have, or things that they've done wrong. And I come back to Brian Stevenson. Good people do bad things, and bad people can do good things. And trying to look for the good in people, I think, is important.
And it's incredible how that experience you have, both in the institutional setting and subsequently in the community setting and corrections, affected your life. Experientially, you would not have, when you took that first job and you decided, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go work, leave the public school system and go work in the prison system. That was a big step. But I don't know, even then you realized what the actual significance that was going to be in your life as a quote game changer.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you for saying that, because I didn't know where that was going to go. I had no idea that that prison was going to lead to Mercyhurst. It was going to lead to ACJS. Really, I mean, it wasn't, as I said, some people have a plan. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. I didn't have that plan, but it just kind of worked out, the opportunities and saying yes at the right time and probably saying no at the right time. It's been a great career. I really have enjoyed it. And I feel it certainly made me a better person to realize, and that a lot of the people that I interacted with in the prison and in the pre-release center were people, had lives, they had families, they had aspirations, they just got caught.
Right. Yeah. So when you think about your work, Pete, over the course of your career academically, and you see how it's sort of withstood the test of time, that is to say, it's relevant today, it was relevant 20 years ago, and 30 years, it's been relevant throughout your career and continues to be relevant. Is there any reason why you attribute that to be the case? Why that actually has happened?
Wow. Why's that been? I don't know. And I think the experiences reinforce it, and maybe I find those experiences so that it does reinforce it. But I don't know. I guess that was my upbringing to some extent, and that it wasn't always consistent with some of the peers that I had in high school. But I don't know. That's a good question. And I just think that the people that I've worked with, people I've gotten to know, I've kind of self-selected. And so those folks kind of reinforce the values that I have and kind of keep the momentum going in that direction for me.
Because definitely your presence has been sustained. When you think about, what you were doing research on and what you're involved in, just taking it a little further to Harbor Creek Youth Services today, that thread continues. Would you like to talk about that, about trauma-informed care?
How I shined away? Yes, that has been a real positive experience in many ways, and First of all, being affiliated with the program is working with kids who have been severely traumatized and the bad life experiences that, when you read about it or hear the staffings, it's just like, how does anybody overcome this? And then to watch this program that's over 100 years old, that started out as an orphanage and went through the group home, went through the intensive care, went through all these changes, and then started to have this transformation to a psychiatric residential treatment facility. It required a paradigm shift, literally. And the understanding that kids have deep scars that are not going to change if you yell at them, you isolate them, you push them, you scream at them. That's not going to work. If you create an environment that is safe and secure and they feel comfortable, and you provide them opportunity to express and learn and gain knowledge about their behaviors and what happened to them, it does make a difference. And the first lesson, I guess, is that it is not easy to change an organization. The transformation took a couple of years and took a lot of training, workshops, revising policies. Staff resisted, staff left, staff undermined the initiatives. Eventually, the critical mass was there, and the environment changed to a sanctuary certified program, accredited 5 times by the Council of Accreditation. And everything is trauma focused. And it starts at the top and goes all the way down to the people working in the kitchen. It is a total institution in the sense that the narrative has changed. It isn't these are bad kids that we have to hold until they're going to be sent. These are kids that have had some horrible things happen to them. How can we help? And it just really is an encouragement that thing can happen, that kind of a change, that kind of a commitment. But it takes very strong leadership, it takes a lot of resources, and it takes a commitment. And I cite Jeff Fagan for this, who talked about the intensity and integrity of these programs. And that's very hard to do. Basically, the fidelity to the model. You can say, yeah, we're trauma-informed. Yes, we're sanctuary environment. But you have to work at it all the time. Staff have to be trained and retrained. They have to have workshops. They have to be reminded. Because complacency happens and whatever. And there's a concern that it can revert back to the norm of what it was before. But Harbor Creek has been just rewarding. The people that work there, some people have been there a very long time and have gone through those changes and still stayed with it. But they appreciate this environment because their job is better. They have higher morale. Their stress level is down. But they've also realized that they've been traumatized in their own lives. So it's kind of, an environment that encourages people to understand their behaviors much better than they did before, rather than just reacting or acting out. I think Harbor Creek is just a jewel in the environment, I think, for that. And I really have enjoyed that time on board and being involved in some of the programs that have been implemented. We brought Regent Greenwald in from Buffalo, the director of the the Child Institute, the Trauma Institute, and in his trainings, just really created a welcoming approach to dealing with the kids. Anyway, yeah, Harbor Creek is just a really positive part. I'm glad to be part of that.
It's compelling. I think in retrospect, I should have had you back up just a little bit and give a kind of overview about what Harbor Creek Youth Services did, the fact that it's a residential. Do you mind just saying what it's about?
As I said, it started out as an orphanage, and it is essentially now it is a residential facility. And it was went to the group home where they had a lot of group homes in the community. Those kind of got pulled in and became an intensive care treatment unit where they approached they used the model of intensive care with the kids in the programs. And then they transformed into this, psychiatric residential treatment facility. They still get some court referrals, but the court referrals are coming through the mental health system since, it is funded by mental health and the kids have such significant problems. Harbor Creek has about 67 to 70 kids in placement, and there are child psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, therapists, education program, and they're receiving over 500 referrals a year from the state of Pennsylvania. The program is just being well recognized that it makes a difference in these kids' lives. And to see them from when they're admitted to when they're discharged, you can see that they've calmed down. They have a little better understanding. Their anger levels are lowered. Their anxiety is lower. The goal is as soon as they're admitted, they're planning their release. And the goal is when they walk out the door, when they're sent back home and they're sent back to the referring agency, that they have the skills to deal with their problems, that they're going to be able to return and know what to do and how to do it. And so they work the whole time with these kids developing, and they call it their self-plan, what they're going to do to protect themselves. And when they feel the triggers, what to do. So a lot of cognitive behavior therapy focused based on the trauma focus that goes on with it.
And it's been very, very successful. And that they've even expanded while you've been involved in terms of adding, art therapy?
The expressive arts, yes. Those are, I think, the jewels of the program itself, because Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, is just excellent. And basically said, you can talk to kids all the time, but it's in their nervous system. It's those scars are buried in there. And for those scars to be dealt with, they have to express themselves nonverbally. So, the music therapy, the art therapy, the trauma release exercises, the yoga, the writing, all those things, kids can express themselves. So the child psychiatrist will say, Johnny, tell me what happened. Johnny just sits there. It's not a verbal kind of thing that Johnny can deal with. But Johnny goes to art class and draws a picture of a house, and the art therapist says, Johnny, your house doesn't have any windows. And Johnny says, I don't want anybody to see it. What's going on? And they have a conversation. And the kid can express, he can talk about it with the picture. That's really, it's kind of a very basic kind of notion of art therapy, but way powerful. And the kids then can talk about it with the art therapist, and then the child psychologist can pick up on it. And so it really does make a difference, the expressive arts. And the kids love the music because they start out their class and go into the groove. They walk in and they do a check-in and say, okay, pick up an instrument and express how you feel. Somebody will pick out a drum. Somebody will pick out the guitar and just and to express their emotions that way. What's going on in their feeling, at the feeling level. And I think, the expressive arts are just the most important part, I think. All the rest is just trauma-focused interventions, treatments, the units, how you treat the kids, how you refer to them. The narrative has changed. It's really just refreshing to go in there. People, I think, that have stayed on after the transition really have they've consumed the new juice of treatment.
It is a unique, truly unique program. And I think that, what Ian pointed out earlier, that there's a kind of self-evaluation the staff are doing as well. Like, when I'm engaging in this behavior with this youth, what am I talking about with myself?
Mm-hmm.
How am I approaching this particular child?
Mm-hmm.
So it can be stressful. It can be that staff have to deal with their own trauma and be aware of what's actually going on there as well.
Yeah. Well, I think there are a lot of things. One of the things about the staff and the child or the kids' interactions is when a kid acts out, staff understands what's happening and doesn't take it personally, doesn't push back. And there's a nonviolent way to confront the kid, to protect the kid and protect yourself. And it works because the metrics on the assaults on staff is down. Assaults on kids to kids is down. Staff morale is up. Turnover is very low. Staff retention is really good. And the staff learn how they can deal with kids like this. Before, they would just be shouting, pushing them around. But it is for them as well. They have to understand their own reaction, how they feel, that they're threatened, they're challenged, and what they want to do is to recognize, how can I help this kid? But he's going through this emotional reaction.
And those are all good indicators. It made me think about it. The fact that the staff morale is great, better than it was. The fact that turnover is not a problem like had been previously. The fact that the youth are doing better in the facility really indicates that this works.
It does. And other studies that we've cited in reforming rehabilitation. The studies on programs that have used trauma-informed care show that it does work. I mean, they get the same kind of results in terms of staff morale and improvement in the children's behavior. It is effective. But, it's kind of like saying we need police reform. We need corrections reform. We need, reform isn't a flip of a switch. It requires a significant change in narrative. It is a paradigm shift. And I'm not sure all the time that there's leadership and commitment to make that happen. Speaking of rehabilitation, another experience in the prison, when I was a counselor, we went to a staff meeting, department meeting, all the counselors, and the manager said, okay, the unit manager said, we're going to have a director from the corrections secretary who says, we're all going to start running group counseling. So Benekos, you're doing drug counseling. Somebody else did this. What did I know about drugs? So here I am in a group with Philadelphia inner city users of heroin, and I'm running this group. I'm learning from them immensely, and it just showed me, okay, what did they report? How many counselors did? How many groups? How many residents were in there? How many hours? That was it. That was the group counseling. What happened? What was the significance? Was there any pre and post tests? Was there any control group? Was none of that. None of that happened. And it just made me realize that, somebody says jump, and we jump. But it doesn't change anything. The prisons still had the whistles and bells, and corrections officers had the keys. And, when you talk about change or reform, it's just very, very difficult. I think that's an area that we need to recognize. What is it that makes it successful? In Harbor Creek, I can see it. Can you do that in the county prison? Some places you can. Police departments, some places you can. But there's not a template, I guess, and you can say this, but I think a lot of it is the person, people that are involved. And again, the CEO, the director of Harbor Creek, is really the person that had the vision and the commitment. And he said, we're going to do it. This is the way, the future. And he was ahead of Kurt Benekos.
That's got to have it. Really. And I think it's an industry. The fact that you've been a part of it and be able to see a trauma-informed program from start to finish. Oh, it's not finished, but I mean, the fact that it's a complete program and it affects every aspect of the youth's life and the facility is fantastic. Let's talk about trauma-informed care, because, that phrase is used a lot. Correct? People, we're trauma-informed, or, we do trauma treatment here in this particular juvenile court, or this particular detention center, or that particular child welfare organization. Do you think we've gotten a little too comfortable with throwing that phrase around, that children have been exposed to trauma and we're trauma-informed staff here, we know what we're doing, as opposed to the model you just described at Harbor Creek, where we're talking about training everybody to, becoming credited in this field? Do you see that there's been a kind of disconnect, possibly?
Sure. Again, this kind of started with research on the children exposed to violence, and then the adolescent or the adverse childhood experiences, recognizing, wow, a lot of kids in the criminal justice system, in detention, in probation, boy, they've been traumatized. They've had a lot of negative experiences that have been significant in affecting their lives. So we get to that first start, recognizing, identifying it. And then, what do we do about it? You develop this notion that if that's the case, you have a model in which you change the narrative, not what's wrong with this kid, but what happened with that, and how do we intervene with that? But you start saying, well, wait a minute, I'm traumatized, you're traumatized, but I didn't become a delinquent, I didn't go to prison. And so there's a sense of trauma, okay, it's just like, everybody gets trauma. What's the big deal? But when we're talking about this in this, clinical sense, there's kids who have had multiple traumas, who have had complex traumas, persistent traumas from a young age, and it really changes their life view of themselves. And, as Van der Kolk talks about, it's emotional scars that are buried into the nervous system. And you ask them, they can't even articulate it sometimes, because when it happened, they buried it. They weren't there present. They just blocked it out. But their body kept that. And, that's why the trauma release exercises or the yoga, where they can, physically kind of release some of that. But I think you're right. It's kind of like if everybody has trauma, then what's the big deal? But there is, one or two, it was a tragic experience when my dog died, very traumatic. That's not what we're talking about. A kid who was sexually abused by his uncle numerous times, and his mother wouldn't believe him. That's a whole different kind of trauma. And then the connection then between kids who have been traumatized, and then their involvement in delinquency, and they traumatize other people. The cycle of violence that goes way back, Lidham and others, on recognizing that, people who become, quote, victimized, then often victimize other people. The police used to say today's victim is tomorrow's perp, was one of the cliches. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's kind of like people just kind of get desensitized. Oh yeah, trauma. We're going to be trauma-informed care. And I think when we did the reaffirming rehabilitation, we looked at anecdotally with juvenile probation officers, especially the newer, who bought into it. They understood it. They got the knowledge. And they said, okay, now what do we do? What are the resources? How are we going to, make this happen?
Right. Well, did a risk assessment on this kid. We find out he's been, experienced trauma in his or life. That what do we have to offer that person to deal with that?
Sure. And again, the model, the recommendation that came out from Heart and Justice and from OJJDP and their reports was every juvenile should be assessed for trauma. It's trauma assessment. And then there should be appropriate placements, appropriate interventions by appropriate staff. Well, the assessment parts were getting done, but not so much the rest. And I think even the trauma-informed court, some juvenile judges embraced it. They understood it. And they changed their language. They changed the environment. They brought in therapy dogs in the court. They, softened the language. They got off the bench and went down and talked to the kid. I mean, they got it. They understood that. They could be tough. They could hold the kids accountable. This wasn't coddling, but they did it with an understanding of the trauma focus. And other judges said, and I think, it does come down to individuals. That, you can't make people drink the juice.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And, even when you talk about that now, I think that has also heightened our awareness, trauma-informed care, about dual or crossover youth, the ones who are being referred to this child welfare system because of maltreatment. And we subsequently find that they've also been referred to the juvenile justice system for shoplifting or whatever behavior. And now they're in both systems, and the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing historically. One agency wasn't working with the other or wasn't aware of what the agency was doing. And so you have a youth that's kind of caught in between there.
Yeah, the old silos kind of thing. He's not in my department, so I don't know. Yeah, and I think that trust, training of staff, sharing of resources. I mean, that model that was established. Some departments in the state followed up on that. But again, you can't, people that are in charge of those decisions, they have to buy into it. They have to really make it happen. And not everybody does. But yeah, that crossover model, I think, was significant. I think when the study that was done suggested as many as 70% of the kids in probation were in the juvenile court had been in the welfare system, child welfare, or protective services. So if you can get them or do something early on, prevent that crossover finally, or if they are going to be dual system or they're in both systems, cooperate with the other agencies and share the resources and recognize that there are things that can be done, or interventions that are successful. But it's just it's kind of like people are comfortable with doing things the way they have done them. That complacency, and change is very threatening for people, depending on what kind of change it is. Best hope often is that new employees and new probation officers, the younger judges, that people that are just trying to get a fit into that system, if they're getting oriented and trained and get the resources, are more likely to continue with whether it's trauma-informed care or just a more humanistic approach and working with other agencies, as opposed to, that's not my job.
Right. But I do think that, as you point out, if you have a good leadership team that's on board and feels that this is important, we need to collaborate with the juvenile justice system from the child welfare perspective, or we need to coordinate our services together. It's much easier than one that's kind of working independently of the other and not looking back. Sort of, we're doing our thing over here in the juvenile court. Whatever you're doing in the child welfare system, we don't care about. We're not really involved in at this particular point.
And you can understand people, are busy. I mean, it's just my job. This is what I have to do at the end of the day. But it is a leadership issue a lot. I think, going back to the town gown kind of thing, it's involved in establishing the Criminal Justice Advisory Committee in Erie. And everyone from the criminal justice system sat on that board. The reluctance was from police, from law enforcement, but we did have, depending on who the chief was at that time, a few different upper-ranking police officers on that committee. But it was like, what are the problems that are going? And, how do we resolve it? There was a sense of, hey, we're dealing with this kid over here, and you're dealing with this kid. I mean, it was kind of an eye-opener. Wow, maybe there's something we can cooperate with, or, I'm working with this. And that was interesting. I mean, it resulted in some initiatives, some grants that came into the county, like the drug court that was established through that initiative in the Criminal Justice Advisory Board. People got to appreciate other people's challenges. You say, well, why don't we do this? And say, wait a minute, this is why we can't do this in the county prison, because of, well, what can we do to get around that, or how can we change? There was a sense of brainstorming, if you would. Right. But it took people willing to do that, rather than sitting there like this, that don't tell me anything, I already know.
Right, right. Now, it definitely does have something to do with it. Those people who actually came to the table and suggesting that they had some interest in this topic, and they want to possibly work together. And even that communication, which might not have occurred between that mental health counselor and that police officer or that judge, is now occurring because they're sitting at the same table together and they're having this conversation.
Yeah, it is interesting. And again, talking about the cycles from like punitive and progressive and, softening and hardening in our community. In Erie, it's interesting. Several years ago, the juvenile justice, or the police division on juvenile justice was disbanded. And the crisis intervention unit was disbanded. And now they're being brought back again, realizing we need to have police that are focused on juveniles, who understand the juvenile problem, understand how the court works. They're really trained and ready to do this. And the crisis intervention with mental health workers, responding to domestic violence. Things you're hearing about going on around the country as part of the reforms of policing. But it is interesting to see the cycle go back. So we don't need police officers dealing with the kids, just put them in the adult system. And, mental health workers, they don't belong, going along in police. But now that's, the drumbeat is coming into that again. But, the leaders are involved in that. The chief of police is very supportive of that. And the mayor is very supportive of that. The next mayor, the next chief of police might say, forget it. That kind of thing.
It's kind of possible. But we're hoping we're down a path where we're not going to make that kind of mistake again. When you think about the sort of, if you could have a crystal ball, but no, if you had a view of the landscape in juvenile justice in the next 10 or 20 years, what do you see as critical or ongoing issues in the field?
Well, number one is prevention. If we're going to really make a difference, it really has to start very early. As we know, the older kids get, the harder it is to make change. Once they hit adolescence, they're on a different track. They've been socialized, they've been traumatized. So really early prevention. And I think identifying and then putting the resources up front really are very important. The schools, in the family, in the community. I think child protective services could be doing a whole lot more if people realize how important they are and what the difference they can make. Instead of giving larger caseloads to the child care workers, make the caseload smaller and bring more resources to bear, help the family more. Usually if there's a problem, there are many problems. Poverty, it's unemployment, it's lack of education, it's violence, and so it's not like we're just going to help this kid, today, but there's a whole environment, whole ecology around that. I think, crystal ball would be, if you really want to make a difference, start very early, identify very early. There's a concern that you widen the net, though, with that, and you bring people into the system. But I think, that's a risk that I think you can take cautiously. But I think prevention is certainly. Secondly, is to recognize that kids are kids. They're not just little adults that have to be held accountable for what they're doing. They're doing something for some reason. Again, back to the trauma. Understand that and provide some intervention that will make a difference. The easy thing is to remove them, isolate them, lock them up, put them in detention. And some kids need to be, for public safety. However, we've got models of restorative justice. We have trauma-informed care with a number of evidence-based programs that work. We have multi-systemic therapy that works with families and with kids. It's kind of like if you put those resources up front, it could probably make a bigger difference. Pennsylvania, the last figures I saw, it cost $192,000 a year to lock up a kid in Pennsylvania. Fortunately, the number of kids being locked up is down significantly in Pennsylvania and across the country. But take that $192,000. What can you do when the kid is 5 or 6 or 7, when he's acting up in school? And how can you better spend that money to help the kid, help his family, and give him a different trajectory? And so I think a lot of it really comes up in the front end of a lot of this. And the resources are there. That's, over here is the research, the evidence-based information, programs of work. And over here is what we're doing. Sometimes it'll connect. And that is a missed opportunity. And somewhere in between there is politics.
But prevention, that is about where it's at. If you can prevent the behavior from the very beginning, then you're not dealing with the aftermath of the behavior. Afterwards. So it's definitely.
And that goes right along with the public health model that we're hearing so much about now of violence. But, we can look at the example of lung cancer and smoking. The public health model has made a significant difference in that area. And people talk about violence now. They're starting to say this is a public health issue. We have to approach it that way. In the early 1990s, I remember this because Deadly Consequences, in the book written by Deborah Prothero-Stiff. She was an emergency room physician in Boston. She was sewing up all these people coming in and said, whoa, this is more than just, an issue of violence. This is public health that affects a number of people, the whole community, police, the neighborhood, the hospital. And her book, Deadly Consequences, laid out a public health approach to deal with it in the early 1990s. And she went on to develop a curriculum for violence prevention with adolescents that has been adopted around and is fairly effective from what I've been able to read about. But, that notion of it's really a different model that we need to look at, not the criminal justice model. Right. Same that we talk about with, people who have addictions. The public health model would go a lot further in dealing with that issue for the society than a criminal justice. A good example, again, was when in the Vietnam War, when so many veterans came back addicted to heroin. There was a tremendous effort to treat them. And I believe, I may have the percentages wrong, but about 70% of the budget for dealing with drugs went to treatment. And it was fairly effective in addressing the problem. And then politics came in, and then there was a war on drugs. It had shifted to 70% law enforcement. It was, that much of a change, and that was a political decision because of potential for re-election.
Right.
That went along with it. But again, the evidence is there. A public health approach. We can really do this. We can do an awful lot. I like being Pollyannish and naive like this. But it's not like it's rocket science. You just have to make a commitment, and I need enough leaders that are willing to.
And as you pointed out in the beginning of our conversation today, what people want the quick fix, and they want to be able to say, "I have the answer. I know how to solve this." And so when you come out and you lay out a strategy that deals with prevention or with treatment, the public health model, they can't absorb that. It's almost as though that's going to take too much time, or I can't commit to that. It's not going to have a soundbite as a politician that it's going to be able to get me reelected or elected the first time. So there's a movement away from that. And I guess part of the question is, how do you bridge that gap? How do you make those people more sensitive to or aware of what the research shows? How do
you educate the public?
Yeah.
So that they come on board? That's the media's role. And the media also has the bleeds it leads kind of thing, which we talked about before.
Right.
I don't know. The commitment is just not there for there. It's a quick fix. what you do. And there's a pattern, again, of you don't want to appear soft. If you go back to, as you noted many times, of the Lily Ward incident. I mean, that is, brought up by politicians. They don't want to be bully wardnized by being soft. So they're going to be tough, and they're going to be tougher than their opponents on that. And they can, propose some legislation that will demonstrate them by tougher sentencing. I don't know. That requires really kind of a significant public approach to informing the public of the problem. Here's a solution, and this is what it's going to take to get it done. And leaders that will follow through it. But I think, again, back to that trilogy of politics, ideology, politics plays so much in this. And I think we're seeing that spill more and more into higher education now, or into education in general. And it's, it does not portend well, I think.
No, and there are certainly going to be some consequences. And they're going to be, from our perspective at least, they're going to be more adverse consequences than positive consequences.
I think. Not to be pessimistic, but yeah. And I think, going back to that again, I go back to John Petula, who's the director of the CEO of Harvard. It was 2005 that said, we're going to get sanctuary certified, that we're going to go trauma-informed care. It took them 2 years to get to that point, 2007, when they said, we're here. That's how long it took. Training, reviews. I mean, it was a process. It wasn't like, okay, tomorrow we're going to be trauma-informed. Okay, you guys read your books and we'll be ready to go. And I think that's, the approach is, it's that easy, but it isn't. And, every day it's trauma-informed. Every day it's sanctuary, and so it takes time. And as I said, training, resistance, workshops, retreats, you're really changing a culture.
And that's the difficult part.
It is.
Because when you think about even law enforcement, for example, where now some police departments are getting the CIT, or the mental health first aid training. I got the training. Good enough. And they'll have to do anything after that, right? I got the training. But the idea being that, no, there's a lot more to it than simply saying I spent 8 hours or 12 hours getting certified in this training. Now we have to actually try to implement it. We have to realize every day there's going to be some issues that may arise we have to deal with relative to this training. But I think it's more like, well, I got my certificate.
Right.
I have it here.
The training.
Yeah. As opposed to I'm really engaged in this and committed to dealing with people that I encounter on the street, recognizing they could have mental health difficulties.
And it's unfortunate, but you read in the media again, these sad cases where police confront somebody who's mentally ill or somebody who is under the influence, and it results in a tragedy all the way around. How can that have been prevented? A different model of policing, maybe. But that would be huge. And again, you don't do that across the board. You do it by the department. This department, and we worried about the New Haven Police Department. It was in the 1990s. That partnered with Yale University Child Center and developed the trauma-informed policing. And, with somebody in the police department say, hey, we're going to do this. And we get a partner from the other side, and we train together. We bring the child psychiatrist together. But it takes that kind of thing. And that program is great. And over here, they're not doing that. How do you get them?
Right. That's it. We have these wonderful model programs. Harbor Creek, the New Haven Police Department with the child center. But then you say, well, what about over here, the next town, or even the next county? It's very different.
Yeah.
In name.
Yeah. I don't want to make it sound like, it's all up to individuals. You can't do anything systemically, but it's harder to change the system than it is a program or a department, and talked a lot about, from up here, the policy is up here, but what happens when it trickles down? It's too bad it doesn't come up from the grassroots where, we've got so many police departments doing this. Maybe it should be national rather than we're going to make all police departments do this, and they don't.
Yeah.
No, it is. I mean, I think it's painful. And I know the people at ACJS who have these panels and are studying policing, police reform, they understand that, and it's very difficult. And, their hearts are in the right place, and their commitment to, effective policing and public safety. But how do you implement that? That's the trick.
That's it. That's the difficult piece of the puzzle there. We're going to shift it a little bit, talk about your career, reflections on your career specifically, as opposed to the broader picture of this history. So what would you say are the identifying characteristics that you and the scholar have or are? When you think about the characteristics of what defines a scholar, how does your persona fit in with that?
Well, that's a good question. Do I have that? I think, curiosity and interest are important in that. I think kind of a passion might be too strong, but really when you have an interest in something and kind of curiosity about, understanding it better and what information you need and how you collect that information and what you can do about that. I think that kind of was a starting point for doing the research and learning and using that to do some more research. I don't know.
It certainly helps formulate the question for the research, right?
Yeah.
You start thinking about what, about this particular issue or problem, or how it might be considered a different way. If you were to start your career all over again, rewind the tape, would you do something differently?
That's a good question. I don't know. I certainly have enjoyed what I've done. I think I've had great opportunities. I mean, teaching really gives you a lot of flexibility in what you do in the classroom, what you do in the community, what research you do. And I've really enjoyed that. It's really kind of individualistic. But part of that also is the network of people they can work with and meet and conferences. And so I think, for me, this has been a very positive experience personally. I feel I've had opportunities that I would not have had if I'd done other careers. And it has also helped me to, I think, become a better teacher, a better scholar, to be part of a larger organization. I think I remember in grad school we talked about the local, the cosmopolitan. You're working at this university, there's more to the world than your university. You have to pay allegiance here and your due diligence. But there's another world out here, the universe of the academy, ACJS and committees and the community. And you have to kind of balance that. I don't know. I don't know what else I would do. I think I'm looking back, I spent so much time doing it. I think, I don't know. That's a good question, Alida. I don't know. It has been so rewarding, and I feel I have accomplished quite a bit and done things that I probably would not have done if I had been in an office somewhere doing, probation work or something.
You've accomplished a tremendous amount. It's incredible. And I applaud all the, many, many contributions you made. What advice would you give to a scholar who comes up to you and says, I'm just starting my career. What would you advise me to do?
Wow. Well, I would say the academic world is going to get even more stressful. And so be ready. It's going to be more politicized, I think. But then once you get into the specifics, I think, first of all, find some good colleagues that you respect that can work with. Find a mentor. Mentoring is very important, whether it's a professor, whether it's a colleague at your institution or another university, and network. Go to conferences and collaborate and work with people in other disciplines, cross-discipline research and projects. I give a great deal of credit to Heather Pfeiffer for establishing the Doctoral Summit. And her curriculum is exactly that. I mean, it's not rocket science what you need to do. Get a good mentor, collaborate, do research, come to conferences, get involved, see the bigger picture. Don't get trapped in your frustrations of your local organization or your university. And then take those ideas back. Get charged up from doing. I think teaching is very challenging, and again, it's a very individualistic thing. People have different ideas and different approaches. But I think what's always valuable, and I guess as dean and as department chair, I observed numbers of classes and observed different styles, and I learned a lot from the different faculty that I observed. So I say, go find a faculty member who's respected as a good teacher and ask to sit in on his or her class. observe your colleagues, what they do, how they do it differently. And you'd have professors that you've learned from colleagues as well. And again, mentors and colleagues where you can bounce off some ideas, feel you have a safety in being able to open up and be, honest about what's going on. I was very fortunate at Mercyhurst with Frank Hagan, who was a good colleague and friend. They collaborated. They can bounce off some ideas and ventilate. Those things are important. So what would I suggest? If you can get into the doctoral summit, do it. That would be great because you would get that information. Something that I didn't hear when I was coming up in my career was the work-life balance, right, which is very important, I think, even more so now with more stresses and more demands, again, and more opportunities. And you can keep saying yes, 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 and burn out. But I think, there is a sense that you can really get networked and collaborate with people. I mean, that's how we met at a regional conference, right, and found we had similar interests. And, as they say, the rest is history. And we collaborated on a number of projects. And that was, I think, very beneficial to me.
And for me, too. It's been great.
So I think, there's no magic answer to that. I think it's out there. You just have to, do it and recognize it. And, people who have good mentors are pretty fortunate. Not everybody does have a good mentor. Sometimes they have people that kind of try to obstruct their careers. But I think, really mentor, collaborate, think about your courses. I think at one point, again, a little naively said that, what is important is recognizing that you need to have passion in what you're doing and share that passion with your students, with your colleagues. Let them see that you're really passionate about that because that will bring in, responses that you want. And you can't separate your teaching from yourself and your work from yourself. I mean, it is an extension. If you're interested in something or believe something or you have an itch that has to be scratched, that comes across in the classroom and how you're teaching. And there are many different ways to teach, different styles and approaches. Find out what works with you and what connects with the student. I think I refer to it as like a chemistry in the classroom. And sometimes that chemistry is just great, and sometimes it's not. That, rework your classes, rethink what they do. I think trying to make classroom experiences and education relevant to the students. Most of your undergraduates are not going to go into higher ed. So they're going to go into a career. So if you're talking about corrections, can you connect that they're interested in law enforcement, they want to be police officers? Can you connect that topic about pre-release to policing? What does it mean for police? If you can make the classroom relevant, and it doesn't always work, but if you can make it, something that might hold their attention. Oh, this is about corrections. I don't care about this. I want to be a police officer. But if you can kind of connect that, what would a pre-release program mean for police? Or what would it mean if you're going into somebody's house to arrest them and you know that the father's in prison? What does this do? So if you can kind of make that classroom relevant, I think that is a challenge. Because sometimes it's just, here it is, we happen to teach
It can definitely be challenging. You talked a fair bit about mentoring, and you've mentored quite a few students in your lifetime and continue to mentor people. What is your mentoring?
Oh, I never wrote it down. I think, find out what they're interested in. I think undergraduates, I think had more luck with them, some graduates who already were on their career path, but find out what they're interested in, or colleagues, what their interests are, and then try to encourage them and give them ideas and opportunities. So if students think, they're interested in, becoming a judge or something, they want to go to law school and become a judge, say, well, why don't you go partner with or go down and observe a judge? We have a judge who's willing to do that, connect them with someplace or someone that can, be a role model, if you will, or give them some experience watching what happens and listening to what happens. So, try to encourage them to develop their interests a little bit more. Sometimes they come back and say, oh, I don't want to do that. But I think that, find their interest and support it, I think, and being supportive, not discouraging, I think. They want to pursue something. How do you help them? What can I do to help you do? Again, my experience has been much more so with undergraduates, but a lot of students think I can never go to a conference and present a paper. But if you guide them along and help them a little bit and give them some guidance. And they go to the conference, a state conference, a regional conference, and eventually a national conference. Undergraduates, they present a paper. I mean, this is huge for them. And you just said, you can do it. You can do it. And show them how. Tell them what. Get the money from the university to pay for their trip. Those kinds of things. They're not huge. But I think it's like start where the student is, or start where your colleague is. Where are you interested? What do you want to accomplish? And then say, well, have you tried this? How about and be supportive of that, and try to provide resources and encouragement.
Well, you're a phenomenal mentor. I'm going to give you an anecdotal experience from your past with one of your undergraduate students. We were on a panel together, and the undergraduate student was doing a paper on her own, and you clearly had mentored her. And she was doing a PowerPoint, and midway through the presentation, the bulb burned out on the projecting screen, and so there's no more PowerPoint. Screen is blank. She did not miss a beat. She may as well have had that PowerPoint up there, because she was able to actually just continue with that presentation. Obviously, we all realize that there's no more power, but unaffected, completely prepared, handled the questions from the audience beautifully. And I know that was because of the fact that you had mentored her before we got to that conference, that she was able to handle that situation. And truly, I applaud your efforts, because so many times we don't always get to see the fruits of our labor. Much like, when you're working in prison or working at probation, you might have put forth a lot of effort, but the fact is that it didn't work out for whatever reasons. Not everybody is a success story. They leave prison. Not everybody is able to successfully go on after probation, whatever it may be. But I just thought that was a perfect example of how well you were able to mentor your students.
When students were going to go to a conference, I would try to have them in the class to make presentations in front of their peers. So they would have had a dry run in front of other students before they got to the conference. And that kind of built a little bit of confidence, so we could debrief and talk about, what else do you want to do, and talk about the timing. And so it was, it was rewarding to me to see that. And I think, again, another positive experience I had was we were able to have undergraduate research assistants. And they weren't so much helpful to me, but whatever research they were doing for me, I had them carve something out of that for their own paper, their presentation, whether it was in the class or to come to a conference. And I think, that kind of role was really special for the students. I think that they were doing research.
Right.
They were going to go to a conference, and they were assisting a professor doing his research. That program went by the wayside with another leader who came in and said, we don't need to do that. But I think those kinds of experiences for students and for faculty, it's a different kind of connection they could have.
It is. And when you think about it, we know of colleagues who brought their students to this conferences. Mm-hmm. We've met somebody who's a student brought 14 students on the train, and he let them. But the fact is that so many students don't have that opportunity when you think about it. They don't have a faculty member who says, for example, I'm working on a project. Are you interested in it? You seem to have an interest in youth or juvenile justice or whatever it may be. And then to actually engage that person to a level where they realize they have an idea about a research topic they would like to pursue. And then they go out and do it. And just really excited time when you have that synergy and that ability to see somebody grab that idea about research and want to run with it.
Yeah, it is. And it reminds me of a colleague I had who used to say, when you go in the classroom, you have students who are all across the board in their interests, whatever it is. His philosophy was teach to the one. Find the one student who is going to get it, that you can make a difference with, and teach to that. I didn't like that theory and that approach. But when you're working with a student like that, it is teaching to the one. You have one student and you're kind of focused on that student rather than the classroom. And I thought, that's really rewarding, because you can see that student grow and develop it. And then when you find out they graduated and went, did something related, go on to law school and become an attorney that works in the juvenile court.
Go on and get a real PhD, one of your former students, and then become the dean of the university. So, of
course, you have seen many of your doctoral students go and become chairs of committees and presidents of organizations, and it is really rewarding. And I think that's when you ask me later about earlier about an alternative career. I don't know. I mean, you have a lot of careers that you can be satisfied in. But, if you close $1 million deal, is that the same feeling you have when you see one of your students get an award for accomplishments? And, I don't know. I think it's just a really rewarding career, and I enjoyed it.
All have intrinsic value that we don't necessarily realize on a day-to-day basis when we're, getting ready to go into class and having to get that exam ready at the same time for next week and grading papers. I mean, you kind of sometimes you can lose track of the intrinsic value. Like, I just got to get through this.
What's the next? Yeah, and I remember as chair and dean, this was one of the things I did not like about that administrative role, is being in a meeting. So an issue on the table, we're discussing it. I got to go to class. I have to leave the meeting to go. I'm walking in the class. My mind is there. That issue wasn't resolved. It's waiting for me afterwards. And I go into class, trying to make that switch. And, you're right. It's when you're going from meeting to class to meeting to paper, you don't have time to sit back and think about it. Looking back, it's that old cliche about, you live your life going this way, but you understand it looking back. And I look back and say, well, and that was really rewarding. I didn't really appreciate that at the time because I was too busy to appreciate it. But, it's a good career. I would encourage junior colleagues and new faculty to really see what their opportunities are. And I think I see and hear a lot of the younger faculty doing that, taking students on studies abroad and collaborating and publishing. When I was a graduate student, there were like 3 journals. If you keep up with those journals, you were on top of the field. Now there's, how many? 30?
Yeah.
So there are great opportunities for publications and
for lots of for research, for collaboration. That's the other thing when you think about it. Think of the old days when you were working with a colleague on in our previous lives on a paper, and you had to wait till the other person sent it to you. Go by the fax machine, wait for the fax to come in, Williams, whatever. And think about how now you could be collaborating with somebody across the globe, and there's it's like push the button. Hey, the manuscript has been sent to that person. Or you could work on the same document at the same time. I mean, so really, technology has changed the whole prospect of cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary, cross-cultural research. Because who could you say you can't get to? I mean, you could get to any country, any individual that you want to do research with.
And you're right. You don't have to take it and FedEx it to the publisher and wait for it to come back and say, we need this in 24 hours. That electronics back and forth is really great.
It's incredible. Quite a change.
And it's good. Technology is going to change it again with the artificial intelligence. So we'll see what impact that has on education.
So what about, if you were to think about the general thoughts on our field in criminal justice criminology, what do you think about the state of the field? If you were doing a kind of an assessment of the whole field right now, what would you say as you watch it? Are there questions that the field ought to be focusing more on or turning its attention to that it's maybe not putting on the front burner, but they're currently on the back burner? Are there some that are on the front burner that should move to the back burner? Should there be a kind of reordering of what we think is what the field should be engaged in?
I think, there has been this ongoing discussion about making academic research and evidence-based information connected to policy. With the, I'm going to forget the name, Criminal Justice Alliance, where there are academics that are connected to the policymakers. That is very difficult to do, again, because of the nature of the politics. But I think that is an area where there's potential to continue pushing that envelope of taking the evidence base. This is what works. Locking people up, for 50 years doesn't work. Again, there are a lot of issues with trying to make that connection. But I think that's one area that can be, how do we make what's knowledgeable and evidence-based in the academic world and higher ed more connected to policy and to practice? How do we do that? It's happening some places where, again, we talked about, some police reforms and trauma-informed care. But it seems at the national level, it's just kind of resistant. It's just hard to push through there. We need to have big lobbyists working for criminal justice. I mean, huge lobbyists that, can be at the same level as the big industries that affect how policies are developed. We need to write the legislation, basically, is what happens, is what the big lobbyists do.
Right.
Give it to the senator and say, this is going to be your bill. Yeah. So I think that's one area that criminal justice and criminology can work on more. At ASC and ACJ has to work harder at trying to make that connection.
And I think that's a critical piece. And, we talked about this. Academics go to conferences and they share their research. They publish books or articles and they share their research. And we talk among ourselves is what we do. We talk about it there, and there, but it's not finding its way into the general media. It's not finding its way into the local newspaper research. It's not finding its way into a public service announcement in that community. And I think we could actually take a page out of the playbill of the American Medical Association. They have a journal, right? Journal of American Medical, JAMA. And I see that they've, on a regular basis, some summary of some research or some recent article in that one of our current issues that found X, Y, or Z is a better treatment for this, or is a more effective way of dealing with long-term COVID, or whatever it may be. And I think, why doesn't our field do that? And we've talked about that. This is like, we have never had this discussion. The executive board of ACJS has certainly talked about it. I think the executive board of ASC has talked about it. We need to take our mainstream journals, JQ, Criminology, and put those, reduce the information. We don't have to put the whole issue out and figure out what we want to get to the public today, or get to the policymakers today, or get to the Senate today, and get it out there. And we don't seem to be able to cross that bridge.
We're too busy doing our own thing to some extent. And I do remember as part of this, we would have, at some meetings, we would contact the local media to come in and interview, or at least focus on that. I don't know if that happens. I don't know if that's being done. You remember seeing maybe some of the keynote speakers being interviewed.
Right.
And a little local, could be more local than national, but local would say, we're in National Harbor, Maryland, we're having a national meeting of the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences, and here's the president. Here's what, at least, people see that that's going on. And I don't know that we still do that, but I remember a couple of meetings we had that done.
Right.
And it could be, like you say, with it's got to be in news releases somehow. We have to feed it into the media. And I think, sometimes you get on these distribution lists, you get push reports, short, this study or this legislation, and the Sentencing Project does a good thing.
Right.
You want the whole report, here it is. What if ACJS pushed those out to all the police departments? Here is, a study that was done by, XYZ, and they found this. If you want to read the report, here it is, but here are the main findings. So a lot of departments would just delete it, but, some will read it, and maybe others will start talking about it. But you almost have to push that out there.
That's it. And maybe who's pushing it has to be critical, too. So, for example, if it's police research, it might not be so meaningful coming from an organization other than a law enforcement oriented, like PERF or IACP, organization that is involved in that area has more credibility, perhaps, in disseminating that information than an organization. I don't know. I mean, I do think this is a critical. We can't seem to get the word out about that's not going to work. I mean, you're going to fund that program, and it's not. The research is pretty consistent that that's not an appropriate response, and we just keep repeating the same mistakes over and over.
Yeah, it's like the progressive message doesn't resonate the way the punitive one. I mean, just those the fear part, the emotional part, that gets broadcast pretty widely. But the positives, it's just like, okay, that's not so exciting.
Right.
But it is. It is, I think, something that the organization can continue to work. I think that to bridge that, and it's going to be a bridge that collapses a few times, but it's something that I think and you ask the question, what can be done for the discipline? I think the discipline needs to become more relevant and demonstrate, again through research findings and evidence-based outcomes, that it does make a difference and it does work. It's great to get the what's promising, what works kind of thing.
Right.
But that's good to me. But is it what's it doing for the public? Do they ever see that? How do you get that?
I think that's a critical piece. How does crimesolutions.gov get communicated to the masses? Mm-hmm. How does that happen? How do the main findings in the most recent issue of JQ or Criminology get distilled and put into just a regular newspaper article in a mainstream media? I just don't know.
Yeah. I think there's been an effort again with the Alliance to push that to the legislators, to the groups that they're working with, but pushing it to the public would also help, because the public can maybe put some pressure on, or at least understand and say, wait a minute, why are you going to build more prisons? The research shows something like that.
Right.
That's, I don't know. How did the AMA do that?
I don't know.
I mean, but I guess people want to know about their health. They're concerned about it, but I would think they'd be concerned about crime and public safety.
Given how it's become a hot political issue, you think everybody's concerned about it just as much as they're concerned about health.
Well, again, you look at a couple of the recent elections where crime has been a focus in mayoral races. It's been public's aware of crime, and an interesting article in the Atlantic recently about a lot of this is just about urban decay. It's not so much crime, which is not going up. There's violence, but it is the urban environment. People are responding to fear based on what they see and what they keep hearing. They don't. It's not necessarily the crime that is causing the problem as much as it is the overall ecology of the urban environment, where there's decay and infrastructure falling apart, and
the lights are disorganized. Right.
There's a kind of broken windows there, but not broken windows.
Right.
But I think there is part of that too. How do you get the public to understand? And I think it's like, make it relevant to them.
Right.
It's your safety, your public concerns. But anyway, I think it's one area that I think the academy can continue to push and work on. And I don't think it's kind of rocket science. It's just somebody has to take the leadership, I guess, and push it and have it happen.
And get it out there on a regular basis in various, where the audience is most relevant for the information too.
I don't know. I don't understand the dynamic of that. But, there are reporters that call professors regularly.
Right.
Okay, we got this problem. I'll call Dr. Alida Merlo. She's the expert on that. What about the other way around? Professor has her finding or research. Who's the news reporter that you call and say, hey, I've got a scoop for you or something? I mean, it's got to be something like that.
Yeah.
And you're pushing it out there and getting information out there. Yeah, I don't know.
So, is there anything that I haven't talked about in terms of your record or something? I mean, I would like to just talk a little bit more about, once again, this idea of taking the research and putting it into practice, and how effectively you have done that throughout your career, and how instrumental you were in establishing those policy institutes at Mercyhurst. That's critical. I'm very quick. We talk about getting the information out. You not only got it out, Pete, you put it into action, got it out, and then did the research on what happened after you put it into action. What would you advise somebody about that? How, if they wanted to emulate you in doing that, what would be sort of the recipe that you would hand to say, do this, you could do this too. You can have this experience.
Well, it's a slow process. You have to really cultivate relationships with the agencies. You can't walk in and say, I want to, study your probation department. It has to be kind of, you get to know the people, and through committees, through volunteer work, and getting to know them, and recognizing what they're capable of doing and what data they provide. But often asking them, is there anything I can do for you? Any research you want done? Can I evaluate some of your cases? Can we look at, the county prison, how many cases are coming in? Can we do a little analysis of that? So it's the kind of thing, what can I do for you? And then, can you do something for me, kind of thing. But a lot of that is really a community-based thing, where you're working with the leaders of the community and finding out some of the problems that need to be addressed, and then developing some collaborations. When we started the Civic Institute way back in its early iteration, we used the Communities That Care model, the CTC model. And, again, that was bringing people in. We did workshops. We had people making presentations, letting them know that there were some possibilities. There's some grant money. we'd like to work on this. So, getting people buying into it and that's a good idea. You can do it. So we did it. And, that's how we got the drug court. That's how we established some of the programs in the community. The Cynic Institute has gone through a lot of iterations, but they're integral to the community now. They do evaluations for programs. They help agencies get grants. They do regular reports for the Office of Children and Youth. They continue to convene the Criminal Justice Advisory Board. And I think, we used that when we were doing the study of the effects of the Fisher Bill in Pennsylvania, the juveniles charged as an adult put in the county prison. That was one that was an eye-opener. For one, we went to the district attorney's office and said, the cases that you're prosecuting as adults who are juveniles, we'd like to evaluate that. He said, oh, no, we don't keep those records. That was not part of the legislation. It was like, you have this massive legislation, right? You're not even keeping track about any cases. So we went the back door and went to the county prison for the kids for being admitted. But those kinds of studies are, they're not going to shake the world, but I think it does connect the academic and the community. And they start to realize that now with the Civic Institute for many years. They'll call and say, we'd like to find out what's going on with truancy. So, sure, we'll come out and evaluate the program. During the violence initiatives that were going on here in the police department, the district attorney's office, probation, a number of agencies wanted to do something about violence. And so they came to the Civic Institute. This was after I left. But, and said, what can we do? And I said, well, there's this program, the call-in program where you contact and identify. And the police said, okay, identify who our cases are. And so the Civic Institute identified, here are your top potential offenders in the community. Okay, we're going to start targeting those, bring them in, talk to them, say, look, we'll help you, we'll give you resources. If not, this is what's going to happen. Violence prevention, violence interrupters. And documented it, reported the data, a lot of publicity about it, the DAs are behind it. Those kinds of things are really exciting. And I, when I was teaching and was able to do that and bring that into the class and say, well, this is really exciting, because it would affect students that be thinking about their careers, in probation or whether it was in prosecuting attorney or the, what else is involved? The probation mission, the law enforcement community part. Yeah. I always found, though, that people wanted to help. They would welcome that if you could help them, give them some policy initiatives. And then, the evaluation wasn't so important to them, but it would be important, for academics, I guess, to know the outcome of those initiatives, to see what would happen. And we didn't have, control groups and the gold standard of evaluation, but at least you'd have some data and you could look at and say, well, this is what the curve looked like before you did this, and here's what the curve looks like afterward. And they said, oh, wow, okay. So it was informative for the people in the community. It was relevant in that sense. But I think there is an opportunity out there. And, but, it's kind of like you've got to leave the university, you've got to leave ACJS, and you've got to walk out on the street and go to those agencies. And there are opportunities that I found, lots of the people that we worked with were welcoming. They would accept you as a credible person, even though you're up in the ivory tower. Right. But no, they were willing to help out.
Yeah, but you'll have to cross the street to get to them first. You have to take that first step.
Right.
Because I think sometimes, again, it isn't bad intentions, it's good intentions, but everybody feels overextended or so much going to involve, like, I don't have time to go talk to those probation people or to interact with those people down at the court. I've got too much going on right here. And I think we have to, again, sort of pause, hit the pause button and take a stand and say, wait a minute, I could do that. Mm-hmm. I could go to those folks and see what's happening, or ask them if they want to come give a lecture in my class, or open the door that way. There's various ways to make those connections. They don't have to be immediately long-term, full-time commitments that you're making it.
Yeah, and that's a great point. We often bring in people, practitioners, to lecture to our students. And, the students love that. Here's somebody who's coming in from the real world. But that also, opens up some opportunities for you as well with that practitioner, that agency. And you hear things from that presentation that give you some ideas where you can say, well, I didn't know you were doing that. Can I learn more about that? Or can I come and meet with your team that's working on that project? So there are a lot of opportunities, and at the end of the day, though, you have to be ready to teach a class.
Yeah.
So that's a priority, and and that's the balance again of that with your research interests, pursuing it, taking advantage of opportunities in your community. It's just, and that's the thing. You could work 24/7, do it all. Work-life balance.
So we have talked in our work together, our collaborations, about the transformation of the juvenile justice system and how we certainly went through that period of the 1990s of the adultification of youth, and where have fun crime. We know the slogans, the bumper stickers, you do the crime, you do the time. And then we took this, following that cycle of juvenile justice that Tom Bernard and Megan Krivicek talk about, we've taken it into a more treatment-oriented, prevention-oriented approach, certainly the adolescent brain development research, Steinberg and his colleagues. So we've really seen a transformation in juvenile justice. We haven't abandoned completely the punitive policies of the 1990s. I mean, we still have juveniles serving life with a possibility of parole as convicted as adults. And we still certainly have juveniles being given virtual life sentences where they're serving 175 years is the sentence, or 100 years, whatever it might be, where when you serve 2/3 of it, it's your life expectancy, you're never going to get out of prison. We still see juvenile procedures that involve shackling youth, solitary confinement for youth. So we still see youth in some jurisdictions where detention is used as almost like a big stick. You stayed out past curfew or something, or you didn't go to school today, you violated that condition of probation, will get you picked up and brought to the detention center tonight to get the message across. So we still see these kinds of policies that are not consistent with the idea of treatment, prevention, and intervention and trauma-informed care. Where do you see, it's 2023, where do you see us going? We've talked earlier this week about a kind of turning back toward that, reverting toward that previous sort of punitive stance. Do you think we've sort of exhausted our limit down this path of treatment and intervention as far as we can go? I mean, are we at the point now where there is the cycle ready to go back toward a more punitive approach? Is that what you see? What do you envision?
What do I envision? I think the potential is there for that.
Okay.
Again, when we talked about the complacency of, we tried this and, we still now have kids, involved in violence. So it's kind of like dismissing some of these efforts that came from the progressive, softening treatment, restorative justice. This has kind of reached this. How much more can you do with this? What can you do with this to help us with these problems? So it's easy these never went away. You're right. It's just that we kind of looked over here for a while. Now we're starting to look back over here. Maybe we need to redo this. And I think that goes back to politics a lot. You hear the rhetoric of get tough. You hear the rhetoric of, public safety and what the public demands. And, you're starting to hear that rhetoric again that speaks to the super predator ones. I mean, we're not at that point.
Right.
You hear that language.
And then accountability rhetoric, which has it's almost like code word for lock them up because, we want to hold you accountable. If you're a juvenile, that means we want to punish you for what you have done, or we want to make it harsh enough that you think twice about doing it again.
And again, realize, you say, we're going to do trauma-informed care. That's the model, the Department of Justice, OJJDP, the research. We're going to do this. But here's this big issue of kids and trauma-informed care. This much of it is trauma-informed care. The rest of it's the way it used to be. So say trauma-informed care didn't work. Well, did you really try it? Did you have fidelity? Did you do it all the way?
Right.
Did everybody follow the recipe? No. But, again, so we're judging the whole initiative based on a very small implementation. And a lot of it never happened. The rhetoric was there, right, but the implementation wasn't. So they said, well, it didn't work. Nothing works.
Yeah.
And it's then easy to say, well, that's the discouraging part about it. We say we did it, but really, what percentage of kids were treated with trauma-informed care that, in a substantive way?
It's hard to conceptualize, talk about trauma-informed care. So, okay, how many kids did we coddle? And now they turn out to be someone involved as an adult in violent behavior. criminal behavior. And so it's like, well, that wasn't exactly what it was about. It wasn't coddling. It wasn't denying that they were responsible for what happened or, holding them accountable. It's just, it wasn't the same kind of punitive orientation. And as you say, it was a very small percentage, but nonetheless, and it's the broad paintbrush, painting it a little bit more.
I think another example from policing is the community-oriented policing. So that was what they were doing. But, the department said, okay, put 2 bikes out there with the police. That was community-oriented policing. This department really changed the department and went full board. So when you say, what happened to community-oriented policing? Well, what did happen to it? How many departments implemented it? How many departments followed up on it? How many departments made a commitment to it? Besides just saying, okay, foot patrol, we'll do that again. We'll respond to the demands of the politicians or the mayor's office or whatever. I think a lot of it is just kind of lip service. And then you judge it based on not the fidelity of the model,
Right.
But the rhetoric of the model. And, the rhetoric doesn't get you there.
That's it. So you think there is a potential that we might go back to harsher?
Well, what's going to happen with the media's reporting of crime? What's going to happen this summer with violence? Those are those topics, and if they keep showing up in the media, mayoral races, they're going to have to respond to that. That's a local issue. Crime is local, and the mayor in Chicago found out that was an issue, and the person who seems to be in line to become the new mayor, get tough, lock them up, more police. Right? His idea of reform. So again, it is potential to really go back to a more punitive stance, kind of dismiss a lot of it. And if the media, continue to report the way they report, they're presenting information. You want to know if there's crime going on in your city. And it's usually the worst crimes that get the most attention. And then how do the politicians respond to it? Again, if somebody says, no, we're going to hire more social workers to go out police when they're out there in the neighborhoods, or we're going to hire more domestic abuse counselors when they're out. Is that going to get you elected?
Yeah.
No, I want police out.
Right.
Well, I understand.
Right.
So I'm not being naive. It's kind of what are politicians going to say that will get them elected?
Right. And what about, recent study that was done, a national survey found out, I think it was 17,000 adolescents were surveyed, and they found out that about 60%, 6 in 10 girls reported they felt persistently sad. Less for boys. And I think it was 4 in 10 or something for the boys. 3 of 10. Anyway, what's, when you see that kind of research, and then you think about the public consumption of this kind of information, is there a takeaway? In other words, is there anyone who's saying, we might want to invest in some mental health services for the community. We might want to have, counselors available in middle school, in elementary school and high school for these youth who are feeling pretty bad about their future or, feeling sad every day for 2 weeks. You see anything coming from that kind of revelation?
Rhetoric. I'm sorry you said that.
Yeah.
But I think, the data get out there. We're aware of the problem. We're pretty good at identifying surveys and studies. But then the real cost, the real mountain decline is to do something. And you can say, yes, we need to do this. We have, more counselors in the school, not more. We need to have more counselors in the school. We need to intervene early. We need to provide mental health services. In some places it does happen. But that resistance to making a strong commitment, it's an expensive proposition. And that's, when the dam breaks, then you do something about it.
Yeah.
When it's got a few cracks in it, you say, we'll just, we'll wait. Let's see what happens tonight. That is very discouraging. You wonder why, what's going on. How many of those girls have been traumatized? Really?
Right.
And what kind of trauma? And what's going to happen to them when they get older? Are they going to traumatize their kids?
Right.
Traumatize somebody else?
And they did find there was an increase in sexual victimization in the girls' population from the previous survey. So, there are some potentially warning signs that, here is a vulnerable population that needs services. And we have the data, as you say, but. That's rhetoric. Now we need to go to the next step and actually implement the services.
it's always kind of like somehow when the fire is burning, we'll respond to it. When it's just kind of a potential fire or it's just some smoldering, you might not respond. But if you get the fire, it's a smoldering. You don't have to fight to make fire. And that makes sense. I mean, I think people would understand that. But then when you say, so what we want to do is put that $192,000 of locking that kid up, one kid, into the schools. Like, well, why are you going to do this? No, I'd say that makes me sound pessimistic.
No, negative. I don't want to. I think you're right.
There are a lot of indicators out there that there's a need for mental health in the schools and more resources to help families. Right. Again, going back to that notion that it's not just, the kid who's depressed and anxious. It's what's going on in the family, what's going on in the neighborhood, with socialization,
It's similar to that the recent report that Charles Puzinchera and his colleagues put out at the National Center for Juvenile Justice about victimization. We know when the peak victimization hours are for adolescents. They're after school, okay, when school's not in session. And yet, there isn't these. You could have some programs right after school that it could engage these youth that they wouldn't be as likely to be victimized. All right, but again, it's not happening. We know that peak times. We know who's likely to be the victim. We know who's likely to be the perpetrator. We're getting more sophisticated data every day from neighbors and other sources. So relationships between the victim and the offender, but we're not necessarily ready, able, or sufficiently interested to say we have to do something about that.
Somebody has to champion the cause in that sense. And there are a lot of causes to be championed, and it's like they're competing for the money and for attention. And maybe, the squeaky wheel gets the money or it gets the response. Yeah. And again, not to sound too rested, but these problems are really kind of connected. It isn't just, violence or crime or victimization. You look at, again, the whole ecology of what's happening. And then it becomes such a huge, where do you start? Start where you can, where the thread is available, grab it, start with that. And if you've got kids in school, females who are reporting, anxiousness and mental health issues, respond to that. It's easy to say.
But it's very good advice. You've got to start with the thread, right? You've got to pull what's available, what you can get, You can't get the entire enchilada for that afternoon, okay? But you might get this little tiny piece of it or something. So you might want to do that first. And I think when I look back on the many accomplishments of your career, I see that. There were lots of opportunities where you, more so than anybody I've ever known, did grab the thread, okay? Did go and work with those probation officers. They did get that drug court established. Did get that institute off the ground. Did work with those police officers and all of it. You did that, Pete. You embody that. You exemplify that.
Well, thank you.
That's quite a legacy. Truly.
And it involved people working together. And so it wasn't just myself doing that. It was a collaboration, really.
But it was a leader. Someone had.
Well, thank you for complimenting me again. But, it does. But and I think... remember that story about the starfish, on the beach, the girl's throwing the starfish in the water, and the guy said, "What are you doing that for?" "I'm trying to save the starfish." She said, "Oh, you're not going to be able to save all these starfish." And she said, "But I saved that one." And I think you kind of do that. You do what you can, where you can, how you can. And, but that, again, if that's your interest, if that's what you think is important, of trying to, again, going back to that, being helpful and supportive, but trying to make a positive difference, either in the classroom or in your institution or in the community or in the academy. I mean, really, I think that's a political statement. Some about people who try to take advantage in a positive way, and people who take advantage in a selfish way. And, selfish isn't always bad if it is also positive for other people. You can benefit yourself and other people. And I think, I certainly benefited from all those collaborations and meetings and driving downtown to the courthouse and having to go through security and all that. I mean, I think it really made a difference. Me, certainly. And
I think, when I see the people from the community, I often feel like, yeah, I had some positive impact. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me.
You got some positive impact that it's continuing. You really did, and you opened the door for future scholars and practitioners to work together, because you did it, and so the door is open. It was, and you mentored junior colleagues to come through that same door, and they're hopefully paying it forward and doing it to their students, and it continues. So I know we're about ready to wrap up here, but I want to just say, first of all, do you want to add anything or say anything? It's been a real pleasure and an honor to be asked to interview you, Pete. Thank you for inviting me.
It is an honor to have you interview me. And thank you for that very nice summary of my career. I forgot a lot about those things. I certainly want to commend Jay Albanese and Brendan Dooley for doing this and continuing to make this series available. I think this is, 50 years from now, people will really appreciate it when they can look back and see and hear people talking about what was going on during that time. So Brendan and Jay really get a big kudos for what they have accomplished.
Absolutely. And Frida Adler for
supporting
getting a hold of those people and to Pearson or Premise Hall, and where are those tapes, and tracking them down and making sure that this project was not buried somewhere or forgotten. So I applaud all their efforts. Thank you, Jay and Frida and Brendan, for your good work. Pete, thank you for all that you've done for the field. And I can honestly say it has been the highlight of my life to work with you. And I think you've just had a fabulous career.
Well, and I'll also say you're a great mentor to me all these many years. Thank you very much. The collaborations have been great. And when we look at our record of accomplishments, they've been a lot of fun and successful and rewarding. Thank you.
Thank you.